Hello, everybody. Hello. You're quite wide, but my Pilates instructor will be very delighted when I actually go core. So if I'm doing that rather artificially, it's because I'm thinking of Paul yelling at me in the mornings. Right, now I've got a tissue just in case. I'm not offering to lend it. I'm just going to have it here in case I need it, because I do find this sometimes a bit difficult. Okay, anyway, I'm now going to start. So we pretend I didn't do any of that. Right. It is an honour and a privilege to open this conference today. It is wonderful to be in a room full of women and a couple of men who share a vision, who recognise the power of the collective, who face the world with love and compassion, and who work together to manifest amazing outcomes. Wow, it's very cool to be here. We know that we have the power to inspire each other, to support and encourage each other, and to create meaningful change in the world. And I imagine that every one of us in here today has in fact been inspired at some point in their lifetime by the words of another woman. Maybe one that you know well, maybe one you've never met. But I know that for myself, I've been lucky to have moments when, without ever knowing these women, their voices have reached out to me over time and distance, just when I've needed them, who has helped me see what is possible rather than what is not. When the voice of those women has helped me to see the right pathway ahead of me. Have you guys had moments like that where you've gone, yep, that's what I need to hear right now? Yeah? Okay. One of those moments that had a huge impact on me and my life was when my mother-in-law shared the wisdom of Eleanor Roosevelt with me. When I was overwhelmed and fearful, she told me that Eleanor had once said, "It is better to light a candle than curse the darkness." This message came to me at a time I needed it the most. Before I started the charity that I'm going to talk about today, I was at risk of being overcome by focusing on the challenges ahead of me rather than the possibilities. I almost gave up before I started, as the task ahead seemed too big and me too small. Instead, Eleanor gave me a new perspective. She gave me permission to focus on what I could do, what I could handle, rather than having to solve it all. And I began on a path which has brought me great joy, but more importantly, has transformed the lives of children who looked fearful and despondent into children who are full of joy and resilience. I have been given you the opportunity today to tell you about my journey. This is just my story. But hopefully I can encourage you to light your candle as Eleanor encouraged me to light mine. And what better time and place than at World Women's 17? Thank you. But I'm very, very aware that with any great opportunity such as this comes great responsibility. Because in talking to you today, I am a spokesperson for a whole lot of children who cannot speak for themselves. I am merely a conduit, their messenger, and I realise that. I really don't matter in the scheme of things. But I realise also that before I can tell you their stories, you need to know a little about who I am, why I care, what brought me here and what motivates me. I can hear my heart beating. Can anyone else hear that? Well, if it stops, that's going to be even more off-putting, but I can hear this ga-dunk, ga-dunk, ga-dunk. Yeah, sorry. Oh, I'm coming from the heart, yes. There you go. So, thank you, Barbara. I also need to share stories of other women with you. Stories that have acted as a reminder to me of what is at stake and have kept me going. I should issue a health warning though, because they are hard stories to listen to. They're hard stories to tell. And particularly when I'm between you and a cocktail function and I'm about to hit you with some fairly tough stuff, it's not a comfortable feeling right now. And yet I need to share those stories. The stories of those young women need to be told, they need to be respected, and I believe that they can lead us to the light. Through sharing their stories, I will challenge you tonight to come together, to light a candle for these children and give them a voice, to bring them hope. And so with that warning, you don't know what's ahead of you, I will begin. My name is Denise Arnold. In 2008, I set up the Cambodia Charitable Trust with a focus on helping young and vulnerable Cambodian children have access to schooling, to keep them safe, to keep them with their families, and to give them a quality education. I feel that this is my calling. I don't know why, and I have to admit this might freak some of you out, but sometimes I just have to spend time and ask, what is it that I need to be doing? What do you want me to do next? So I really do see myself as that conduit, as somebody who's just simply trying to get a task done. People ask me, well, when did you figure this out? What happened? What was the big key moment, the step that you took? But I don't really see it like that. I mean, life's a journey. I think maybe when I was born, was that the step? It's probably more just a progression through life of you learning who you are, finding your place, figuring out what it is that you need to do. So with that in mind, I think I'll just talk about where it all began. I come from Tauranga. My sister is here. She's got a different hairdo. Have you still got that dress? No, yeah, sorry. I'm the middle child, so apparently I have a whole lot of issues. I didn't know that until I was older, and I could use that as a reason for misbehaving. My parents are retired now, but when they were working, my dad was a mechanic and my mum was a nurse. I consider I had an unremarkable childhood, so the roots for this work didn't come from there, but I believe that in one respect my childhood was remarkable, and that I think it was blessed. I was happy, I loved my sisters, I loved my family, and we are still close, and I had a lot of opportunities to grow up safe and happy as a child. My parents saved carefully, and eventually they built their first house. Those were in the days you could actually literally build your house without 5 million regulations, so Dad swung a hammer and built the house. We had monkey bars in the backyard, and I had calloused hands. How many had monkey bars as kids? Yeah, man, wow. Yeah, leathery. Anyway, not now. My mum sewed most of our clothes. I think actually... Yeah, that's... yeah. So I think when she mastered a pattern, I don't think she felt she needed to move on. What you can't see, and I want to thank you for doing this for me, you can't see my mum is wearing her slippers. I mean, look at her hairdo, and then she's got her slippers on. And my dad has got a tub of Brill cream in there, so typical Kiwi family. I look like I've been up to mischief. My mum's got a grip on me there. As a youngster, I was always drawn to help others. I wasn't going to say this because people said you can't say P on the stage, but I just have. So when I was little, my mum reminds me that most of my friends that I brought home from school smelled like they'd peed their pants, and they were just really a little bit grubby and had nits and weren't too totally onto it. And she said, you know, Denise, you just brought all these kids home and I just had to constantly be feeding them. But I would like to point out, because I do have some friends in the audience, you don't smell of pee. I've moved on from that. In case none of you want to admit you know me, I have let that go. Anyway, I loved school, really loved school, except most of my reports said, could try harder, yeah, fair cop, and should stop talking in class, but I guess some things don't change, so I couldn't really do much about that. I could shut up, but that didn't seem an option at the time. I took tertiary education for granted, went to Auckland University, did my law degree, and got onto that career path. I was really ambitious. By crikey. Actually, my parents offered, first time I had a pay review, to come along and talk with me to my bosses. Yeah. I just kind of went, During that time, I got married, had my daughters. There is a point to this. I'm not sure what it is, but it's just sharing funny photos probably. Emily and Tegan. I have to admit, actually, that being at work all day, dealing with really hard negotiations was sometimes easier than getting these two into bed at night. You can relate to that? Yep, okay. They were busy times, but I do miss them, those times, now that the girls have grown up. I treasure the fact, though, that my girls they're confident young women, confident enough that they're both in jobs today where they couldn't come. One is visiting a pig farm, and I came second to that, but it's an important visit. She had to do it today. Yeah. So anyway, but she sent me lots of emojis, so I think that's all. But I was told that apparently a smiley face is passive-aggressive when I send it. So I now go sending you smiles, but in a non-passively aggressive way, end comma, brackets rather, when I send them. It's a long text now. Of course, though, they are now making things happen in their life. Actually, they were always perfectly behaved. Yeah. I guess some of the things they made happen I could have done without, and but being responsible for those girls changed me. I actually eventually grew up. So we're going to get serious. I worried about their happiness, their health, the friends they were making, and I worried about keeping them safe because I became more conscious of the dangers that they would face in the world. And I wanted my children to know their own minds and be brave, because you need a bit of fight in you, I think, to pave your way through life. I think I can tick that box as well. So, you know, as far as Mothering 101 is concerned, nailed it. Not quite. But anyway, I found that when they were naughty and mischievous, it gave me a bit of heart. I thought they'll be okay. I thought that second. Usually I thought, you little buggers. But anyway. As I watched my daughters growing up, though, I became more and more conscious of the opportunities that they had compared to many children throughout the world. How confident they were that they would always be safe, fed, clothed, loved. I knew that in some countries, children are trafficked and sold. And for me, I found it just so disgusting to think of children being abused for sex or pornography. So if you need to leave, now's a good time. The huge numbers of defenceless children who are trafficked for profit and hurt by people who know better and who are in a position to actually help them just appalled me. Still does. I wanted to make a difference. And I felt as though there was something I needed to be doing. I volunteered for an organisation which worked on combating trafficking, child prostitution and pornography. And being a lawyer, I was set on the really exciting task of reviewing laws and lobbying for changes. That's what you get when you're a lawyer. One day though, I heard of a man, this lady came into my office in town and she said, this guy is flying out to Asia next week. He's going to have sex with children. Here's his passport, I know it. And I contacted the organisation and I was told we couldn't get involved. And I was just totally disillusioned at this point. I thought, what is the point? And I realised with a really sinking heart that I thought I'd found my pathway, but in fact, I wasn't helping any of these children in a real sense. I had not saved a single child after all that effort. Just as I was struggling with this, my eldest daughter Emily came home from intermediate with the news that she had a chance to go to Asia on a school trip. Emily was just 12, an innocent Kiwi kid, full of fun and mischief, and she had no fear. She would be going to a third world country known for trafficking and prostitution. Suddenly, the possibility of Emily going missing was right at home, in my doorstep. The thought of her suffering made me feel ill. If she didn't come home, I would never be able to rest. I would have to search for her for the rest of my life. But these children disappear. The chances of me finding her were minuscule. In the end, I decided that I couldn't stop my children experiencing the world. I just had to make sure that they'd be as safe as I could possibly make them. So I went up to the school, totally annoyed a whole lot of teachers, asked lots and lots of questions until I was satisfied she'd be kept safe. And she went on the trip. She loved it. I had a nervous breakdown, but she came home. And I was so relieved. I could have stopped there and I nearly did. My daughter was home. Cool, she was safe. But I can remember sitting on the couch and just thinking, hang on a minute. My daughter came home, but what about all those other kids that haven't? Just because they're not my child, it doesn't mean that I can't be involved. At that point, I read an article in the Herald about children in Cambodia being rented out of a brothel on a weekly basis. Just bring them back when you're finished. And I couldn't get that out of my head. I had actually avoided all that kind of stuff. I just can't cope with it. But this article was smack bang there, and I felt sickened. I was keeping my children safe, but other children were being treated like that. And I feel the universe was giving me a fairly good shove-along. I had to do something. I realised that my truth was that if I wasn't part of the solution, I was part of the problem. And by not acting, I was letting evil flourish. But how on earth was I going to save these children? Where would I start? It seemed such an enormous challenge, and I admit that I was paralysed by the huge task ahead of me. My family watched my struggle and frustration as I tried to find my way forward. And as you've heard, it was my mother-in-law that broke the impasse. That was when she told me about Eleanor Roosevelt, saying it's better to light a candle than curse the darkness. That was a huge moment for me. Something just clicked, because it dawned on me I didn't have to solve it all. I just had to do something. It's like the little boy walking along the beach. You would have heard of this story. And there's thousands of starfish that have been washed up on the shore. And he stops and he picks up a starfish and he flicks it back into the water. Someone comes along and says, look at the thousands of starfish. You can't possibly make a difference. And he bends down, picks up a starfish, throws it into the water and says, I made a difference to that one. Mother Teresa put this beautifully. She once said, if you can't feed 100 people, then feed just one. Well, I felt like that. I couldn't save all the children, but I could save some. I didn't know how at the time. I couldn't stop child prostitution, but I could stop the supply of children into the brothels. The fact was, it's better to do something than do nothing and be paralysed by being overwhelmed by trying to do everything. I could start small and I could take it one step at a time. I had found my candle. Now I needed to light it. So in 2007, I travelled to Cambodia. If I was to give a caption to this photo, I'd say clueless in Cambodia, because I actually had no idea how this task was going to play out and how many nights I was going to lose sleep, etc., how many wrinkles I've got. Anyway, I tried to understand how I could help in a meaningful way, some way that I could sustain this for the rest of my life, and a way that I could bring others to join me on this journey. There is such a huge gap between the children I saw and still see in Cambodia and our lives here in New Zealand. I struggled with the basic lack of fairness in the world that Teresa mentioned. We're all born with that innate sense of fairness. This isn't fair. That by bad luck, they're born into poverty with really not much chance of crawling out of it. I was lucky I was born into a country where I get free healthcare, free education, and I've got a government that has, will support me if I can't feed myself. In Cambodia, there is nothing between poverty and death. I realised, though, that it wasn't children being stolen or abducted that was the problem. More and more, I was seeing children being sent away to work overseas to relieve the family of one more mouth to feed, and with the promise of some income that child was going to be able to send home. Poverty is a huge, unrelenting force, and these families are vulnerable. However it is that the child comes to be taken away, though, the result is they're gone, and they vanish, and their stories vanish with them. As I travelled around Cambodia, though, I realised I really had to figure out what my limitations were, and I realised I could not be the person rescuing children from brothels. That would break me. I'm sorry. I'm just not that strong. I had to trust my instinct, and I had to look for the point of the most impact. And I realised, for me, this is just my story, that instead of being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, I needed to be the fence at the top. I needed to work in that positive space. Keeping children safe with their families, with their communities, and stopping the flow of fresh children into those brothels. And I was realistic. It was only me at that time, a small person in a big world. But, as Mother Teresa said, be faithful in small things, because it is in them that your strength lies. So between Eleanor and Mother Teresa, the message was just the same. Just get on with it, girl. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have figured it all out. And you don't need to be big. So I took a leap of faith and I started. But more on that later. Because now I need to tell you Cepal's story. Cepal was born into a poor family in rural Cambodia, in a province called Kampot, where we work. Her father died, and her mother had to leave to go and work to support the family, so she left Cepal and her brother in the care of their grandma. She couldn't come home to visit them, and what money she sent home was never enough. Cepal started school at 6 years old. She had to walk several kilometres with the intense Cambodian sun beating down on her head to reach a school with no water or toilets, no pens or paper, to sit in a classroom with no floors and a blackboard you can't read from. Despite that, she loved school. She had to help her grandmother harvest the rice, etc., so she missed quite a bit of school, which is quite common, and she had to repeat grades as a result. It wouldn't have occurred to her that her teachers didn't know how to teach and they had nothing to teach with. She was happy and she spent her spare time playing soccer with the other kids. But as she grew, she needed clothes and more food, etc., and the grandma was getting older. One day, some people came to the village and offered to recruit a whole lot of young people for some work in restaurants. When Cepal heard of this opportunity, she decided she'd leave school. This was something she just couldn't pass up. She was told she'd earn enough money to send some home, she could study, she'd live in a nice place, she'd have plenty of food. So she left. However, Cepal was taken to Malaysia and she was sent to the home of a man and his 2 sons. No one knows the details of what happened behind closed doors, but Cepal was beaten, raped, starved, and horribly abused. She lived a terrible existence. She was invisible. She was a sex slave. She was a child. Can you imagine her life locked away, out of sight, with no one to hear your cries? It must have been terrifying. When it became clear that there was nothing more that could be taken from her body, that everything she had been wrenched from her and her very soul was broken, she was so damaged that she would die, they sent her back home. She's one of the few who came back. And that's how we know her story. Her grandmother could do nothing for her. She could not afford medical care or doctors. Her story found me. But 2 weeks too late. Cepal had already died. She died an awful death, broken, sad, and despairing. The laughing girl playing soccer with her friends was no more. And her story haunts me. Could I have helped her to recover? I mean, some of the rumours about what happened to her are so awful. I don't know whether she would have died anyway, but maybe we could have helped her. I even think maybe we could have stopped her going in the first place. But I'll never know. I heard of her story because her school was next door to one that we are supporting in Cambodia. Sadly, Cepal's story is not uncommon. To understand the degree of poverty in Cambodia, you won't need to understand some of its history. Cambodia is a country that has suffered nearly 30 years of conflict and war, which has been broken and is slowly trying to rebuild itself. In the 1960s, it was carpet bombed during the Vietnam War, even though it wasn't a combatant in that war, to stop the movement of troops through Cambodia. This plunged the country into civil war between 1970 and 1975, a senseless war. And you can imagine the Cambodian people's relief when in 1975, the rebels won, pushed out the government, and they had a new leader with big visions for the country. His name was Pol Pot, and things were about to get a whole lot darker. I remember when I was growing up seeing Pol Pot on television, people were cheering at him. I didn't understand the terrible things were about to happen in Cambodia, and nor did the people of Cambodia. 4 years of systematic killing, of torture. All educated people were killed. All teachers were singled out. All lawyers, doctors, engineers, business people. If you wore glasses, you were killed. If you spoke English or French, you were killed. If your hands were too soft, your skin too pale, or if you had an opinion, you were killed. 1.5 million to 3 million is their estimate of how many people were killed, because they can't find them all. Out of a country of 8 million, a population of 8 million, they lost that many people in 4 years. The country has never recovered. That's a whole generation missing. Cepal's story is confronting, not just because it's difficult to listen to, but because it calls us out, because we can help girls like Cepal. It's in our power to change lives and keep them safe. The biggest factors in making children vulnerable to trafficking are poverty and ignorance. I decided to combat those issues through education. Education is the key. Education changes lives. As Kofi Annan says, education is a human right with immense power to transform. On its cornerstones rest the foundations of freedom, democracy, and sustainable human development. What better investment can you make in your fellow human beings? And it's a basic human right denied to many, but we can change that. I set up the Cambodia Charitable Trust in 2008 with a focus on helping children go to school, keep them there, give them access to quality education, teaching their teachers how to teach. It's simple, but it has a high impact, and it's sustainable. The gift of education lasts a lifetime. As I'd planned, I started small, having faith and the strength of taking one small step at a time. And I met Suan. He worked as a volunteer translator for VSA for years, so I'd already heard about him. They said he was a good man and he had a good heart. And he has exactly that. He's passionate about education and about helping the children of his country. He's become like a brother to me. He conveniently thinks he's a year younger than I am, although he doesn't know his birth date. His parents were killed by Pol Pot. While I learned about Barbie dolls, he learned to read which way bombs were going to fall out of planes as they went overhead. And at the age of 8, he was forced into a Khmer Rouge work group, and he watched his friends killed, die around him. When the Khmer Rouge were forced out of power, he had to walk the length of the country to find the only remaining family he had, who was his sister. He was 12 years old. It took him some years to recover, and it took some years for the Khmer Rouge to stop mortar bombing his school. He didn't get to go to school until he was 16. I decided to work in the school that Suan had gone to as a young man, his home village. That way, he knew everyone and everything that was going on. Because at that stage, I was really conscious to ensure we understood the needs of the community and how the school functioned. I didn't want to impose I'm not a teacher. What do I know? And this seemed to me the best way to achieve it. I decided also to support existing schools. The bare bones were there. They were run down, broken, often with bullet holes in the walls, if they had walls, and there were teachers employed by the government. I could use that existing infrastructure, but there was very little else. The first challenge that I thought we needed to face was removing the barriers to education, which is fundamentally giving the children something to wear and a notebook to write on. We needed to get the children to school. I met a wonderful woman called Sraymom. She'd been a counsellor before she had her 3 boys. And I employed her to travel around the district on her scooter or on foot to visit every family and ask them to send their children to school. We gave them a shirt and then a skirt or pants, a pen and a book. They cost maybe $10 a child. Some of the kids needed a bike because they live just kilometres from school. We told the parents how important education was, and we got the kids to school. Tick, bums on seats. Then we had to give the teachers something to teach with. Basic supplies, pen, paper, scissors, eventually textbooks. And then we started holding teacher workshops in our schools to actually teach the teachers how to teach. Previously, they stood in front of the classroom and chanted at the kids. The first time I walked into a classroom and saw the teacher moving around, engaging with the children, and the children excitedly running up to the board to write their answers on it, I actually got a bit weepy. I had to go, oh, sorry, dust. It's one of the times you can see an impact. And for the boys and girls who were most at risk, we found them a sponsor to save those children being sent away to work and to help put food on the table. You might recognise this one. The sponsors pay $40 a month just to help that family out. They get all of it. We don't keep any money. And those sponsors I consider are lifesavers. One unexpected impact of attracting these poorer kids to school was the number of preschoolers they brought to school on their hips because they're already in childcare mode. You know, they're caring for their siblings instead of being at school. So we had to set up preschool classrooms. We had to teach the teachers how to teach the little kids. When we could, we developed libraries in the schools. It costs only about $500 to set up a library, but you know, when you've got a lot of work ahead of you, sometimes you don't have that $500. But anyway, we've managed every school has now got a library, and it's become a heart of the school, a place the children love to go to. We run a loan system so they can take the books home to their family and they read them to their parents and siblings. I find it curious that the most popular books to take home are about how to raise a pig or how to build a chicken coop, because the kids love reading that, don't they? When we can, we put toilets and water into the schools. Can you imagine a school with hundreds of children and no toilet and no clean water? Really? In the early days, the children found me quite the novelty, and they'd stand watching my every move, unless I moved towards them, and then they'd gone. Now they carry on with their lives as I'm a piece of the furniture, but they love being at school. And my role is to keep them there, give them the opportunity to get a quality education and keep their families together. I feel very lucky to be able to do this. I've been accepted at face value, and I've been welcomed into communities and homes. I've been invited to stay in the village, which is an honour. It's also a very hot, noisy night, and I had to go out and pee in the middle of the night, and there's lots of stories and I just don't know if I've got enough time to tell you them. So, but I saw the families working together, and you know, they're just like we are. They have the same dreams, the same goals for their children. Every parent wants the best for their child. They want to feed them, clothe them, keep them safe, and give them the tools to lead a fulfilling life. That's not just our goals. Every life counts, and we must play our part in respecting that. Education is a goal we share for all our children. As Kofi Annan says, knowledge is power, information is liberating. Education is the premise of progress in every society, in every family. The drive for education is universal. We must acknowledge that every child has the right to food, shelter, health, and education, and we can deliver that. From those very first simple steps of getting children to school, we slowly increased our reach. When we'd got one school underway and functioning, and we managed to find enough money, we tackled the next school. We're not talking huge amounts of money. To run our smaller school is something like $8,000 a year. Our biggest school is $30,000. But you know, there's a lot of demand, so I have to raise each one before I take it on. It was slow progress, but we just kept chipping away one step at a time, each year taking on one or two schools and giving the basic support they needed to get them functioning. We had told the donors in New Zealand that 100% of the money we raised goes over to the projects in Cambodia, but I realised we hadn't actually told the people of Cambodia, and didn't they have a right to know? So we published our goals in Khmer, the Cambodian language. We read them at school because many of the parents are illiterate, and we told them what we believed in and our undertaking to them and their children. They didn't know that we were all volunteers. In the development world, there are a lot of people out there who are getting quite wealthy, and little of the money sent reaches the ground. When the parents and teachers heard that we were volunteers, they were all surprised, and they looked at us differently. They saw for the first time that we were delivering this from our hearts. We pay all of our own costs. No one has any personal gain from this. It's all quite transparent. Over time, we proved ourselves to the Ministry of Education there, and we've got a really good reputation with them. The ministry directors were taken aback when they understood that we had no other agenda other than to help them improve their education outcomes in their country. We don't influence religion, politics, or the curriculum. We just adopt the ministry's guidelines and policies and help that ministry achieve its goals. And when they saw our teacher workshops, it's quite daggy, they asked whether they could send their staff, their directors and inspectors along to learn with our teachers. I thought that was pretty cool, pretty scary, but cool. The next progression was to improve the quality of teachers that were graduating from Teachers Training College. The training colleges near our schools were pretty run down. The trainers had little in the way of resources, and most teacher trainees come from really poor backgrounds, so they've got nothing to contribute. We started providing some resources. We've eventually improved their living conditions because they live there in dormitories. And when they graduate after their 2-year degree, we give them a teacher pack, which costs about $40, but it gives them, a map of Cambodia, a map of the world, globe, rulers, pens, scissors, things they need to teach with. Many of these teachers are going to end up in schools that we can't support. We support a total of 16 now. There's thousands. So we need to make sure that every teacher that graduates could be effective in their role as a teacher. And if you think about one teacher impacting 50 children in their classroom, at least, some of these classrooms have 70 or more kids, you can see the huge impact a teacher has. The investment is repaid 100-fold. Teachers create future generations. They shape lives. So we need to give them the tools that they need to be able to do that. From those first few children going to school, we support 12 primary schools now and 4 secondary schools, and the 2 teachers training colleges. We were audited by the Ministry of Education in Cambodia. One of our schools ranked in the top 10 in the country, and one of our teachers training colleges ranked 2nd in the country. Personally, I find that horrifying because we're providing basic support. So that shows you, the depth of the issues there. We have 8 Cambodian staff, including specialist teacher trainers, a sponsorship manager, and 2 trained nurses. Right now, I know that 6,500 children are attending much better schools than they were before, and they're getting a quality education while they're there. You can see some of the images of some of our work in the space through there, I think. Is that it? Yeah, okay. So we had a wonderful photographer, Stacey Simpkin. She came with us last year twice, managed to lure her back. And she shows some photos of our schools, some of the children in their home environment, and some unsupported schools. Hopefully you can spot the difference. I'm hopeful that seeing those images will bring these children alive to you, and you can gain a sense of who they are. On our sponsorship program, we now have more than 320 children who are sponsored, so they're not pulled out of school to go to work. These are the most at-risk children. Their families are ultra poor. In Cambodia, it's kind of scary when you have all these grades of poor. You have poverty, and then you have ultra poverty. Each sponsor has changed their sponsored child's world. The boys and girls were quiet and withdrawn and had a sense of hopelessness before, but now they're thriving. It was interesting because I once asked the team in Cambodia, could you give me an assessment, please, of the effectiveness of the sponsorship program? And I thought I might get a spreadsheet, some data, but they had a meeting, they sent back their result, and their result was this, their measure. The children look up, they look you in the eye, and they smile. I did get my data, I did get my spreadsheets, but isn't that the measure? For those children, they have been transformed. They're excited about going to school, they're learning, they're excelling. There are many more children that need sponsorship to help them keep in school, and many will drop out before completing primary school. That's the reality. But these are the ones we can help. We've employed 2 trained nurses, and they work directly in our schools and the teachers training colleges. They are the first of their kind delivering frontline healthcare to these kids. It's often the first healthcare these children have received. They also provide health education, how to wash your hands, how to brush your teeth. And we've taken on board the challenges faced by many of the girls going to school when they're having their periods. We've adopted the Days for Girls program out of America, and we have wonderful volunteers, some of whom are here today, sewing reusable sanitary pads. We've got some on display down in the next level, where I think you're having your morning and afternoon tea tomorrow. Yeah, so please have a look. They're very cool. I'd like to hear from you if you're a sewer particularly, or if you're like me and you've got, well, I don't anymore because I've been raided, but if you have lots of fabric, we need to hear from you. We've trained our Cambodian staff to deliver adolescent health and reproductive health education programs. That's part of the Days for Girls model. They don't just get those kits, they learn about why they have their period and what it is and what it means and why is it kind of regular. So if you think about these children having health education for the first time, and it's in their school curriculum, this isn't something we've come up with, they're meant to get it, it's their right to get it, but they've never had the resources, and now they do. I love what we do. It's a huge privilege to be part of this and to see long-term change happening. I didn't see my role in this work coming, but what amazes me is how everything has fallen into place. Not without effort, but it shows me I'm doing what the universe has asked me to do. I'm on the right path. I have found it exhausting and at times emotionally hard, and at times I've thought, what am I doing here? But if that happens, I get a jolt from the universe, a reminder of what's at stake. One time, I was feeling it was all a bit much, so I went in Phnom Penh, went in to have a foot massage. And I could have listened to the music and had a wee doze, but instead, I said to the young girl who was massaging my foot, "Where do you come from? How old are you? Did you go to school?" And we had a talk for a while. And then she said, "Can you help me find my sister?" And she started telling me her story about her sister Tita, a story of debts and desperate parents, and Tita, who found work overseas. The parents' fear for their daughter's safety, but the reassurance that a whole lot of them were going together. Travel arrangements would be arranged. Passports, no problem. Here's a list of phone numbers so you can ring Tita when she gets there. But she's gone. Phone numbers don't work. Company doesn't exist. I tried to help her and I put her in contact with some Cambodian colleagues, but I believed Tita had gone. And I thought of my sisters and how much I love them and my daughters. And young women I don't know and will never meet, but who need us. How can I rest? I can't let them down. We're a global sisterhood. We must support each other. Fortunately, I'm not alone in this. My family have been a huge support. And there's wonderful women that have joined me along the way, including our own Teresa, Barbara, Lindy and Chris. And there are more absolute angels in the audience who are here helping me today. They've helped me carry this candle, and they've added their strength and their love in many ways. It hasn't always been easy. I need to raise $600,000 a year just to keep the current projects going. And I do it part-time. I have to work. I need help if I'm to expand this program any further and help more children. I have had sleepless nights worrying about how I'm going to raise money to help the children that are dropping out, that we're losing. Sometimes I get frustrated that I can't help anymore. But I need to remember that each child we help is one more saved. Like the starfish, we can give each child a better chance at a better life. A life of their choosing. They might want to be a farmer, they might want to be a lawyer, they might want to be a seamstress, but they should have the power of choice. to manage their finances, to feed their children, to be able to read what the medicine instructions are. We've had some amazing successes. This year, the first of our sponsored children have finished high school. They're all girls, and these 5 young women have all decided to go to university, and their sponsors have backed them. They want to study business, management, accounting, banking, and one wants to be a professional translator. Yes, that's the one I need the most. But we've had some small successes too. Like the little girl who was told by a man, "Hop on this bus, dear, I'll get you home." And she got out of the bus and she looked up the top because she could read. And it said Vietnam. And she refused to get on the bus. A small step, but life-changing for her. And there are huge flow-on effects from sponsoring girls in particular. World-respected economist Jeffrey Sachs says measuring the impact on an educated girl is that she marries later to a better quality of husband. I like that bit. She has fewer children, but she has them later when her pelvis is developed sufficiently that she can deliver them safely. They survive childbirth, they survive their childhood, and they go on to be educated themselves. So an educated girl is a pivot point. She contributes to her community. As Queen Rania says, when you educate a girl, you empower a nation. And I want us to empower the girls of Cambodia. I believe I know how, because I believe we're doing just that. And we need you to help us reach more girls. This is Navin. She's an orphan. She's kind of loosely being raised by the village. Very scary, because she is hugely at risk of being sold off. But Frank sponsored her. She's given clothing, books, stationery, food. She's watched over by our sponsorship manager. She loves being at school. One day, someone in the village said to her, "I can find you a job. Come with me to this other province." And do you know what Navin said? She said, "No. If I stay here, I can go to school." And she refused to leave. What if she hadn't had Frank? What if she hadn't had that safety net? This is Chander. She's been sponsored by a couple called John and Helen. I sponsor several children. She's finished primary school now, and she's made the transition into secondary school, which is fantastic. Her family is a little bit unusual in that it's intact. Her parents are rice farmers. Neither of them are literate, so it's important to them that their children learn to read and write. They are very, very proud of their daughter, Chander. Chander's now looking at going to high school. From a child that would not have finished primary school, she's now aspirational. She wants to go to high school. The high school's 20 kilometres away from where she lives, but John and Helen have given her a bike. Still a long way, but she'll get there. She's determined. She wants to be a teacher. And we can help her achieve that. But previously, she thought the best way to earn an income would be to go overseas. Like Cepal and like Tita. Isn't that horrifying? Chander is very close to her little sister, and she helps her with her schoolwork. Thanks to John and Helen, the family can keep all of their children at school. Their life has changed dramatically, and they just exude love and happiness. Navin and Chander are a reminder of how easily we can give girls like them a whole new world of opportunities and a sense of confidence and belonging. They know they're important to us. Imagine if we'd been there for Cepal and Tita. We need to keep on going. We have much more work to do. I know we're bringing about long-term change in rural Cambodia, but I need help to take this to the next level. What if we could help shape Cambodia on its path to recovery? We support boys and girls from preschool right up to high school But from high school, we need to be a bit more strategic. As Sheryl Sandberg says, no industry or country can reach its full potential until women reach their full potential. So you've heard that our first 5 girls are now heading to university with the help of their sponsors. I need more girls sent to university. And with the blessing of the ladies of running this conference, we're launching a program called World Women, which is about us helping these young women go to university. We'll be bringing women of the world together, women helping women, and women changing the world. The cost to send a girl to university is about $3,000 a year because we need to send her to a dormitory. We need to keep her safe, and we want to have a house mum there running it. I'll tell you, the risks for these kids from rural Cambodia going into the city are huge. We want to make sure they're okay. I believe it's my responsibility to give these girls the same chances that I had as a child and that I gave my daughters. They're no different. As Malala Yousufzai said, I raise up my voice, not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. Those who have fought for their right to live in peace, their right to be treated with dignity, their right to equality of opportunity, their right to be educated. So I raise up my voice to you on behalf of these children, honouring Cepal and Tita, and other children we don't even know that we've been too late to help. We must act now. We must focus on the good we can do, on the stories such as Navin and Chander. I urge you to hear the voices of these children, to bring your love and support to them, your energy and financial backing. You can help make a difference to these lives, to open doors that have previously been closed, and give them a chance to lead their country, but most importantly, give them a voice. This is my passion, and that was my story. Whatever ignites your passion, may you find the courage and determination to follow your heart. At this conference, you are surrounded by women who want you to succeed in whatever goal you set for yourself. It is a great time to embrace the power of the collective. This is the now. So, let us all face the world with love and compassion. And over the course of this weekend, let's work together to manifest amazing outcomes. Let's create meaningful change in the world. Let us start a movement. If we light our candles, we can push back a lot of darkness together, and we can transform lives. We can change the world. I'm Denise Arnold from the Cambodia Charitable Trust. Thank you for listening to my story, and I look forward to meeting you over the course of this weekend.